podcasts over at wildgamesproductions.com and d20radio.com.
First there was the original.
I thought it might be nice for kids. Keep them off the street, you know.
Then the basic.
This is a simple game.
Then the first version of the advanced.
Good, clean, wholesome fun.
Now the hammer comes down. Welcome to THACO's Hammer, the podcast for 2nd edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons.
All right, welcome back to another episode of THACO's Hammer, the podcast for 2nd edition D&D. Welcome back, Bad Mike.
Hey, guys.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know this isn't the voice that you're used to, but unfortunately our host, DM Glenn, could not be with us this week, but he wishes us well from his in real life events that he has to take care of, but wishes us luck on our episode 4, and we all know that any podcast worth its salt gets past episode 4, and episode 3 is when most of them die, so it looks like we're here for good, man. We're here to stay.
Tried to kill it, didn't die.
That's right. I'd like to take a time before we get to the emails and what we did this week in Hits and Crits to welcome our latest addition to the Wild Games production family. That would be DM Brian. Say hello, Brian.
Greetings and salutations.
Renclaw!
Also known
That's
as
me.
Renclaw on dragonsfoot.org.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and give us your table cred, as we call it here on THACO's Hammer?
Oh, let's see. It all started in 1980, playing BX with some friends of mine, actually over the phone of all things. You know, it took us about 2 years before we actually started meeting face to face and playing. But went through that. Then I started buying up as much D&D stuff as I could, to my parents' dismay. And yeah, exactly. And went through, and once I got to first edition, which was like 1982, I was a dyed-in-the-wool 1E player up until 1990. Yeah, about 1990. And then I actually got bamboozled into playing a 2nd edition game, and that's where I've been ever since.
Right here with the rest of us. Well, we're glad to have you. Looks like you'll be a permanent addition here to the family. He's not replacing Glenn, everyone. Glenn will be back next week. We've decided to make our membership here on THACO's Hammer up to 4. So more people to talk and discuss about the things that we all love, 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons.
And more to cover for others when they can't be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's not waste any more time, and let's get into Hits and Crits.
What do you feel like doing tonight?
I don't know, Ange. What do you feel like doing?
Oh, we ought to do something. It's Saturday night. I don't want to go bowling like last Saturday. Oh, what do you feel like doing tonight?
I don't know, Ange. What do you feel like doing?
Hits and Crits.
All right, Hits and Crits. Let's see. Let's start off with the new guy, DM Brian. What did you do this week in our D&D fun?
Well, excuse me. Well, once I found out I was going to be part of the family, so to speak, you know, it kind of got my my creative juices flowing a little bit. I've been painting miniatures and, you know, working on some things in my campaign. There are some things I have that been working on for, oh goodness, I want to say like almost 10 years that I haven't quite gotten to finish.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working on converting, well, as we'll find out in future podcasts, I generally DM in the world of Mystara, which is of course the original, you know, D&D world. Right. And I've been converting that to 2nd edition since, I want to say, 1992. So, a 19-year project. What's
Setting
that,
up
Mike?
series, right?
Yes.
Original D&D modules, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a very, very lofty goal. Very lofty goal. I'd love to see it when you get it finished.
If I ever get it finished.
This is true. This is true. How about you, Bad Mike? What have you done this week?
Quick with this because I didn't do any gaming this week, and we were supposed to game Friday, and it was my fault that we didn't game, and I'm just going to move it straight on to you, Corey.
Oh, fun as usual. Let's see. This week, what have I done? I've done some more illustrations for a company that's putting out some retro clone modules. I'll reserve the name for them just out of my whole respect and non-signed NDR, but just giving them that respect of anonymity until they're done. I've done some illustrations for myself for my campaign world, and now, because now it's Sunday, I've run 2 D&D games, one right after last week's show and one before this show last night. I've been doing a lot, a little too much. You might
say that.
Yeah, I never want to say I'm burnt out on D&D, but let's just say it's getting thin for me DMing. I'd love to get on the other side of the screen, but it doesn't seem like it's anywhere on the horizon.
And that's a shame.
Yep. All right. I guess we'll move to the emails. We'll check the mailbag here. Glenn left it at the front door before he left. We have one in the mailbag. Email comes from a J. Epps. He says here, "Hi guys, I ran across your podcast on Dragon's Foot." He's J042 over there, in case anyone needs to know. "And I just wanted to thank you guys for the show. I've been out of gaming for quite a few years, and now that I'm trying to get back into it, I decided 2nd edition was the best way to go. Good job. Good job, Jay. I've been hitting the used bookstores and Amazon to find what I needed. I've got the core rulebooks, a few splat books, and a couple back issues of Dungeon. There's one thing from your first show that I wanted to talk about. In your Loaded for Bear section, Corey was describing the Kopesh sword as the, air quotes, Hassan Chop cartoonishly giant scimitar. It actually is the weapon. The weapon tended to be a bit more exotic looking than that. I found an image from Sir Richard Francis Burton's Book of the Sword, which showed the sword looking more like something out of a Klingon armory. The manual lists its speed factor as 9, making it a lot slower than the broadsword, which has about the same damage. I'd like to think that it's due to its ungainly and top-heavy nature. It does look really mean, and I'd say it might be a favored weapon of smarter orcs or hobgoblins. He's included the image in the email, and if we can, we'll post it up on the website after the show.
Now, the Kopesh has that really cool little curved top, right? That's the
yes. Yes, it's since he called me out, let me first apologize to Jay for misleading or giving misinformation out to our listeners. If anybody's seen any sort of history channel where they talk about Egypt or they talk about any of the Middle East areas, it's often shown as an Egyptian weapon. And Bad Mike, I think you were telling me that it's rooted in as an Egyptian weapon. Yeah. Yeah, it's got a weird, it comes up from the hilt and then it kind of makes like a backwards teardrop shape, curving back. I'll put up the picture, but looks like I was wrong, so let me be first publicly to say I was wrong.
It takes a big man to admit that he's wrong.
And I am indeed that big man. All right, anything else anyone needs to say about the...
Please email us. We're not getting enough emails, guys. Come on.
Very good.
Looks get on the stick, people.
If you don't like us, email us. Tell us what you don't like. Tell us what you like. Whatever.
Give us an email. Send it over to thacoshammer@gmail.com. Or if you feel like calling us on Skype or even your cell phone, you can leave us a voicemail. The number is 405-806-0555. All right, let's move on to It's in the Book.
You ever go to school, stupid?
Yeah, and I come out the same way.
Is that your idea of an idea?
It's in the book.
All right, It's in the Book. What are we talking about this week, Brian?
We are talking about minis and maps.
Ah, yes.
Love them. Love them both.
Some people love them, some people hate them, some people ignore them, but we're going to talk about them.
Absolutely.
I guess a lot of people do use minis, and a lot of people use maps, and minis could be anywhere from $13 pewter minis to, a bottle cap or a soda lid that you just use to mark that is your character in this position where it's located in its space. I don't know. What do you think, Mike? Do you use them? Do you like them?
Love minis. I've always used minis, and I always think it's really odd when people say they don't use minis, because I think that's half the fun of the game. It's the minis, not necessarily painting them, because I can't paint worth a darn, but just the fact collecting them and be able to place them on the mats and see your character's position. And I've had over the years players get some really big attachments, especially some of the early Grenadier minis. That's their character, and to this day they'll pull that mini out and say, "Oh, this is my first fighter, and this is my first mage." So I couldn't play without minis. I don't see how people do play without them. I love them. I love those things.
Yeah, I personally would say that I cannot live without minis. Being an artist and drawing and painting, one of my favorite things to do is get a brand new mini, wash that under the sink, under the tap, and dry it off and start painting it. I've got hundreds of minis, and every time I see a new one, I'm like, oh, that would be a great addition. Or I need a character, I need to go find a mini for the character. And just you start collecting, and pretty soon you've got a large collection, and I use them all the time.
Absolutely. I enjoy using minis. After playing in a couple of games back in the day where basically most things were done on a big whiteboard, and then actually I have to say my interest in minis really took off when Reaper started putting out Dark Heaven.
Oh, yes.
Putting out that line. That's
good series of minis.
Absolutely. Raupartha, it was really good. Grenadier, at least to my experience, was kind of hit and miss. Some were good, some were kind of eh.
Sure, in the nascency of the mini, I guess, lifespan.
Game
Absolutely.
Back late 70s, early 80s, it was Grenadier was everybody had the same box sets. They all had the Grenadier gold box. That was the big. Any place you went to game, somebody had a gold box set open with the Grenadier. It was kind of a common denominator of the hobby at the time. Was then every once in a while you run into somebody that had some Heritage or Citadel, something kind of off the beaten path. But for the most part, it was Grenadier back in the early days.
Yeah. How about you there, Brian? Do you use the minis when you DM or play?
Oh, absolutely. Especially for for my players, although I basically use glass beads as monster counters because I could easily go bankrupt trying to get, considering how many monsters I usually throw at my players in my games, I could easily go bankrupt trying to buy miniatures for pretty much every monster that I might use.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I'll tell you the one thing that I fell in love with since I've been playing D&D is it's totally opposite, but it actually goes back to the roots of D&D, mini wargaming. GW, Games Workshop, one of the greatest producers, in my opinion, right now, of some really high-quality minis. They do a wide variety, and trying to collect 30 pewter orcs from any place, you will break your bank, even just as simple as orcs. But you can go to GW, and for half the price, you can get a box of the plastics. I mean, they look just as good, and they stand on the table just as well. And obviously, we all like the pewter feel because it's nostalgia. That's how they originated.
So Court, what do you think about the plastic, the Wizards of the Coast plastics? What do you think about
the Wizards of the Coast plastics? Well, now that they're no longer making them, I can give my true opinion. I thought they were garbage. Wizards of the Coast put out, it was not Wizards of the Coast, my apologies, it was WizKids, put out a series of HeroClick minis. If some people don't know what they are out there, the HeroClick minis was a game where the stats of each of the minis were actually on the base, and you would spin the base to show the hit points, the attack power, and what have you. hence the name Hero Clicks, because you would click them as you'd rotate. I think those minis were made in a sweatshop in Taiwan with blind Taiwanese children with
Just
a
made
paintbrush in each
on the
hand.
definitely. I have to go on record as I actually like them, and the reason I like them and I use them is because, from what Brian said, you can go broke trying to get monsters, and that was an easy way to get a lot of monsters. Was the plastic minis, because you could get an army of goblins, 50 goblins, for basically pennies on the dollar. Whereas if you're trying to paint an army of metal mini goblins, it's going to take forever, and you're going to have to buy them all, and it's just a lot easier to use the plastic ones.
On that point, I will agree with you. It was easier. The thing I did not like about the way it was done was that it was like a deck of Magic cards, Magic the Gathering cards. You did not know what was in the box when you bought the box. If they were more displayed and you knew what you were buying, I think they would have a little bit more popularity and they would last more, because you buy a box and you get your umpteenth drow, and you don't have drow in your campaign world, and you now have 52 of them because you're trying to get a single storm giant. It's a little it's a little disheartening. I'm not buying another one of those boxes because I don't want another darn drow. I think I do like the quality of the minis, but the ease of use of the ease of purchase of them was good. I personally prefer to paint my minis, and I know for a lot of people who don't want to paint, they just want to get into gaming. They're great. They're superior.
And one of the issues I have with them is that for instance, I'm running a campaign. It takes place in the frozen north, and I have a need for frost giant minis. Well, I have a few of the metal ones, and they're pretty hard to find now. The old metal ones, and they're hard to paint. So I thought I'd get some of the new Wizards of the Coast minis. Those things are collectibles. They're not just like you said, you can't just buy them if you want them. You've got to buy them on eBay, and they're $40 a piece. Well, I'm not paying $40 for a plastic mini. Sorry.
Right, because they put the minis in the boxes that you could not look through to see what's in it. It made some of them collectibles, and while it's a good model for Magic cards, in my opinion, it killed their own customer base, because, like I said, no one wants the 57th Kuatoa if they're doing desert campaigns in their world.
That is true.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to buy a box and end up with like 15 serpents if there's no serpent men on my world.
Teams, they'd have like the Underdark set or the Ravenloft set or something. But like even then, you're going to end up with 50 bats instead of the one vampire you want.
Exactly.
I didn't buy them because I came across some here and there that I used, but I didn't buy them because exactly as you said. If I want something, I want that monster. I don't want to buy it. So I can't
exactly.
And the one guy who has it in Nebraska, he knows you want it bad enough, and it's a rare. So now you have to pay $40 on eBay for it.
Well, prices haven't come down at all either. If you look at those, they've probably gone up a little bit.
Since they're out of print. How about maps? How about you, Brian? Do you use maps? Like, do you use grid? Do you use hex?
I use grids, especially with the advent of and this is going to be something of a hot button, but with the advent of the Player's Option series, where they actually came out with sort of like a concrete set of rules as to how big a square is, how far your character can move in combat, and all of that. It made it a lot simpler for me, especially adjudicating fireball, blast radii, and things like that.
Right. Yeah, it's just like that. That, in my opinion, is the predecessor of the 3rd edition grid, and because 3rd edition relied a lot heavily on minis and maps, and just like 1st edition had THACO near the end, which none of the classic gamers want to admit.
Can I say something about that for a second? Okay, folks, I've ranted about this on Dragon's Foot a couple of times because that seems.
There we go. Come on.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, right. I'm going to take out the hammer, and it's going to do double damage to you. So, basically, THACO has been around since the Moldvay rules and the old green sheets, and we're going back 1979.
Back then. Yep.
Yeah, and it's only gone forward since then. So it's not just a 2nd edition It's not just a second edition advent. It's been around for, let's see, 32 years now?
Mm-hmm.
And, it's one of those things that kind of get my goat as a player of second edition, and it always has. And when people start doing that, they're basically just using that as to take a shot at second edition.
Yeah.
And because when you put their feet to the fire, most of them can't really articulate what it is they don't like about it.
Right.
Because first edition, second edition are so interchangeable. They might as well be one game, but there has always been this big rift between the two.
Allow me to be the fine print in between your rant here to say, everyone listening, here on Dragon's Foot, we don't edition bash. We won't say one edition's better than the other.
We try not to anyway.
Yeah, well, that says nothing about bashing the people who are grognards for their edition, though. We will bash them. We won't bash the edition.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I find maps personally myself important. I've gone through probably 7 or 8 evolutions of my mapping on the table. I've gone from getting a box of third-rate recyclable copy paper and copying 1-inch grid PDF that I found online, and it makes perfect mapping, and just taking it to a printer and saying, print me off 500 copies of this, and then I would draw room to room and add it as the players went through the dungeon, because they couldn't see ahead, and there was no point in drawing all of it out. So what I would do is room to room I would draw on the map, and then they would interconnect them, taking one off. Then I've gone to the clear piece of Lexan that I flipped over and took a Sharpie, and 1-inch by 1-inch lines did the entire grid on the backside on a 2 foot by 3 foot piece of Lexan. And now I'm running something that I found on the 3.5 D20 SRD site. I believe it's d20srd.org. I have a projector suspended from my ceiling, projecting down onto the surface of my gaming table. And essentially it is connected to my laptop. And I know a lot of the grognards out there will yell, "Why do you have a laptop at the D&D table?" It's there because
it's the 21st century, people.
Exactly. I have it connected to the laptop, and I have Adobe open, Photoshop, and because Photoshop uses layers, what I can do is I could have the grid on the bottom layer or on the top layer. Underneath that, I can do a fog of war. Underneath that, I can do the background, and then what I would do is put in the dungeon in between them. And then as the players would move across the projected image on my table, I could just erase part of the fog of war that they could see.
That's genius.
And instead of standing up and telling everybody, "Okay, you guys, we're all fat over here on my table. Why don't you guys separate a little bit so I can get between you and dry erase my old dry erase board so I can redraw the next room," all I have to do is pull up the next file.
Wow.
And it speeds up the game immensely. And, they still have control of the minis, and they're moving the minis. But, when you're sitting there and you're behind the screen with all your books and your dice, and you're at the end of the table and everybody else is, around the map, and you're like, "Can you move that guy over there?" No. To your left. No. Yeah, back one. Yeah, right there. I can just go on the Photoshop and put a red mark and go, "Put that guy here."
Wow.
I find it breaking up, or I find it getting rid of so many of the time stallers that classic mapping does. Sure. And I don't use hexes. But the cool thing is, if I did, all I would have to do is pull down, the see-through hex layer PDF that you can find anywhere on Google, and just throw it right into the Photoshop, and bam, I have a hex map. The downfall is I have to sort of play at night. And I can't have the top lights on, so we have area lighting so people can see their character sheet, because it is a projector. And if the room's too bright, you really can't see it. But if you go to d20srd.org, I believe it is, there's or just Google D&D projector kit or projector project, and there's pictures of the gentleman that I got the ideas from. It's not bad. I prefer it, and all my players are like, I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry, we're not using the map tonight." And they all like, "Oh, man." So they're all used to it now, I got them spoiled. How about you, Mike? Do you use maps?
I don't think there's anything more beautiful than an empty graph sheet. waiting to be filled with your mapping. And we still use a lot of that. We use a lot of hex maps, and because you can draw on them, you can dry erase, and we use this quite a bit. But
you mean the battle mats?
Yeah, the battle mats, the hex
yes.
battle mats. We use those, but I'm kind of different than a lot of DMs. I actually I draw the map. I don't. One of the biggest stop downs in the game is trying to describe a dungeon. And one year, at the first year of NTRPG Con, we had Rob Kuntz, and he ran a version of his El Raja K classic dungeon. And I think that group took 2 hours just mapping, because it was like, okay, you go down 20 feet and you turn to the right. No, not that right, this right. And then you go another 30 feet and you turn to the left. And then there's a side passage that opens to the right. And there's one that goes north. No, wait, this north. I mean, it takes forever. So I just say, screw it all. I will map out what they see on the hex map.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I've always done it. And it just seems like you can get to the good parts. Now, not to say that mapping isn't fun, because there's nothing better than players that screw up a map
and can't find their way out.
But there's nothing worse than a player who wants to map literally everything. Yeah.
Yeah. We've all seen them.
I love that. I love drawing. I love making the maps, and I think I have every map I've ever drawn from back to 1979 to today. I've got a file cabinet. It's great to pull those things out and pull out the map we had for G1 through 3 and say, wow, this is what we did when we were in high school. We played this. So I'm a.
Well, I know for a fact myself personally, one of the more successful ways that I did mapping before I got to Projector, they sell 3x5 index cards with graph paper on them instead of just plain white or lined.
Very cool. Those are very cool.
And what I would do is I would lay the map out, the big piece of Lexan, what have you, and I'd lay the dry erase markers in front of one of the players, and he'd be like, okay, I'm the mapper. So what I would do is I would individually, instead of doing them on little single pieces of paper and laying the paper out, I would draw a section of the room or the floor or the hallway that they're doing and hand it to him. And he would draw it for me on the map. It's making your players, taking one more responsibility off the DM.
I like that. That's a good idea.
Yeah, any other DMs out there who use the dry erase map or use the Lexan or whatever you use, just get some 3x5 index cards. They sell them at Office Max. They sell them at any of the office supply stores. They have graph paper on them, and all you do is or you can even cut up full sheets of graph paper, just big enough squares that you need. And all you do is you just continually draw each room, because when you make a map for yourself, you'd number the rooms, room 1, room 2, room 3. So
something a lot of old people might not know, too, if you like to go old school and do mega dungeons, is they make really, really large graph paper.
Yes, that's right.
And I've got a pad of that, and that is so cool to use because especially if you're doing a mega dungeon and you're mapping, your players are mapping, you can just start in the middle, and they're like, holy whatever, how big is this thing? It's this piece of paper is 2 feet by 4 feet or whatever.
I have seen those. Those are on pads that when if anybody's here worked in a high end business, or they have the easels that they would set up with the markers and the flip over large pieces of paper. They actually have those pads with inch graph paper on them. I have seen those. Yeah, those are really cool.
I've got some of those, and they're like I said. If you're doing a old school mega dungeon, that's the map paper to use. Don't use the little graph sheets. You'll have a pile of those before too long.
Yeah,
absolutely.
All right. Well, I think we've beat this horse to death. Any of you guys out there have any comments, concerns, questions, or just want to say, hey, what was that link again, or what was that idea again? Send us an email, and we'll read it on the air. Well, guys, let's move on to people skills.
The face is familiar.
It's mine.
And so it is.
Oh, yes, of course. It stands out a mile, doesn't it? He's so common.
A little lady comes in here and starts throwing her butt around. What is that supposed to do?
All right, forget I said anything.
Maybe I will.
Well, that's pretty good.
Don't tell me you weren't looking at it.
Well, that's not half bad.
She's giving it right back to you.
People skills.
All right, people skills. What are we talking about this week? It looks like, what is that there, Mike? Is that...
Dwarves. Shorties.
We are having a dwarf day here. All right, people skills. Any kind of kits or
Well, how to Brian? Since you're the new guy, how do you run dwarves in your campaign world?
Well, I'd say probably about 80% of them are kind of the, the basically a stereotypical dwarf, dour, don't mess with me. It takes a long time for you to become my friend, but once you're my friend, you're my friend for life. It's sort of like, that's, sort of like the Gimli archetype, which of course, I'd say probably about 90% of D&D players are familiar with.
Yeah.
But every now and then, especially either as a player or as a DM, I like to, throw a curveball. I mean, I made one dwarf character who's like an 8th level fighter, and he's like really quiet and really soft spoken, and and his beard is like cut short, and he actually is polite to people, and things like that.
A polite dwarf.
Yeah, polite dwarf. And the only thing is his name is Trayson, or I don't know where I come up with these names, but yeah, but I remember playing this character back in the day, and one of my fellow players called him Tracy because he thought he was rather girly, and that's when the prototypical dwarf comes out in this character, is when he's being made fun of, because he's been made fun of all his life because he's soft spoken,
speak softly and carry a big battle axe.
Yes, exactly. or a really nice throwing hammer in this case.
Yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I usually run them, quote unquote normal, for, if you're in a dwarven city, yeah, you better not try to steal, because you're really going to be in some serious trouble if you get caught. But yeah, normally, on the regular side, yeah, I just run them typically, but every now and then it's just good to throw your players a curveball and give them something they haven't seen before.
Well, everybody, or if you listen to the podcast we did Elves, I have a saying. It's called "Make the campaign your own." And if you listen to that podcast, you also know I don't really like a lot of the Tolkien stereotypes. So I kind of tried to throw a curveball in my campaign so that people that were running another race would kind of have to get out of their comfort zone. They couldn't run the gruff, angry dwarf who hates elves and this and that. So dwarves in my world, they're actually kind of cheerful guys, and they're not they're the ones that do all the art. The elves in my world are warriors. They don't have time for art. All the great art in my world is created by dwarves. They do all the sculptures, all the paintings, all the songs. So I kind of put that in there, and then also they have a very long and rich history. My world had a cataclysm about 2,000 years ago that basically destroyed the surface world. Well, the dwarves were fine. They've been going on for a long time, so they're really kind of the superior race on my world, and they're not a dying race at all. They're doing really well. They have no problem underneath the earth doing their thing. They don't actually have a lot of enemies, because Drow in my world are not underdark creatures. They're actually above ground creatures, so they don't have to fight with them. They're probably their main enemies are Durgar and to the Darrow. But I also have a thing. My dwarven adventurers in my world, clans are considered the utmost importance. Your clan you belong to, and they can either take the place of maybe a few hundred individuals or a huge city. And adventuring dwarves are considered insane in my dwarven society, because there'd be no reason to leave your clan. So that immediately gives player characters who think they're going to be able to talk to their dwarf buddies when they're on an adventure. It ain't going to happen, because if you're running around with a bunch of humans and an elf and a hobbit or a halfling, and you run into a bunch of dwarves, they're going to say, this guy's nuts. I mean, we don't want to have anything to do with this dwarf. He left his clan, and he's a weirdo.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So I've kind of thrown that. That's actually made some really good characterizations of some of my players that have run dwarves. They're really kind of the outcasts, the dwarf adventurers.
Yeah, that's a different spin on it. I mean, I've never seen that. That's an interesting way to take the dwarves as a race. Personally, go ahead.
All right, go ahead, Corey.
No, I was just going to say, personally, for me, the dwarves themselves as a race as a whole are treated differently as far as, the trope or the stereotypical dwarf, the dour gruff. They're not dour and gruff. They're more, I guess you'd call them, they have zero empathy for, any other race. They don't hate everyone. They just really don't care. They'd much rather deal with their own race and deal with the furthering of their race. And, yeah, we'll trade with the humans. Do we hate the humans? No. You know, could we live without them? Sure. We don't care. Oh, the dwarves or the humans are attacking the elves. Oh, we don't care. We're not like, yeah, kill the elves. The elves, we talked about on the elf episode about the elves and dwarf animosity that is prevalent in so many, worlds for this genre. I don't have that at all myself. Well, that's not true. Everybody hates the elves in my world, if everybody remembers.
Yeah, I heard that podcast. I was like, wow,
yeah.
that's different.
But, yeah, the dwarves are more like, okay, well, that's great and all that you humans want to make giant magical constructs and, get technologically advanced and all that. We're going to go ahead and mine these gems. Why? Because you like to buy them. It's more all about them. I guess you could say for my dwarves. They're still the same. There's adventurers and there's funny ones and happy ones and angry ones. All 7 of the dwarves are representatives. There's a sad one and a sleepy one.
One's a really good
That's
doctor.
Right. That's right. One's a great cleric. Yeah, high level cleric. We call him Doc.
Yep, really good healing spells.
One of the continual tropes of dwarves in D&D is that they can't use magic. There's no dwarven magic users. How do y'all handle that in y'all's campaigns?
Oh, in mine, they're very strong in divine magic, but yeah, I've never quite been able to justify them using arcane magic because they just have such a really, really strong resistance to it. I mean, I think if I really wanted to, I could probably, go out of my comfort zone and do that. But getting back to the whole racial tensions between the dwarves and elves, I downplay that a lot in my game. Because it's just so typical that dwarves hate elves and all this other stuff. But my whole thing is that especially since I use Mastar, their nations are very close together.
Right.
Now I think I think I play it more as a rivalry than an actual antipathy. If you catch what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, just reading through a lot of the source material I have, dwarves play, elves play pranks on dwarves prank elves, and back and forth like that.
So it's kind of a brother rivalry more than just, a genocidal rivalry, basically.
Exactly. Because whenever it starts going down that road, history-wise, something always comes up to say, "Oh, wait a minute, we kind of need each other."
Yeah.
As a dwarf, I may not understand why this elf thinks the way he does or acts the way he does, and vice versa, but it's better to get along with them and just needle them every once in a while rather than, say, "Oh, there's an elf, it must die."
Dwarves in my campaign, they actually pity elves because elves are a dying race. They're engaged in a genocidal war against human barbarians, and the barbarians basically breed faster than the elves. So they don't really have a rivalry. They feel pretty sorry for the elves. They realize the elves aren't going to last that long, and when they do have contact, they're just kind of, well, we're sorry that you're eventually going to be off the face of the earth, and it really sucks, and so that there's not a lot of animosity necessarily between the two races.
Oh. That's the other thing. Now that you brought that part up, is the fact that dwarves and elves do not procreate really, really quickly. Not nowhere near as fast as humans. And
we're the cockroaches of the fantasy world.
Absolutely. Yeah, they breed really fast, and if you let them, they'll take over an area before you even know it. But as I was saying, elves and dwarves don't procreate really quickly in my world, and the thing is that that's another reason why they kind of, have learned over the centuries to, at the very least, tolerate one another, because they know if they both know that if they actually went through another war, it could possibly wipe them out.
Right.
wipe out one or the other, or reduce them to the point where they're no longer viable as a race. They're basically extinct.
Well, talking about the race itself, I got a question for both of you. How do you guys use it? How many sub races do you use of dwarves? And do you have any?
I have there's hill dwarves, which are basically dwarves that don't mind living on the surface. They're not considered totally insane. Mountain dwarves, but basically they're dwarves that spend all their lives underground. And then there's the Durgar, but basically that's it. I don't really have a lot of sub races.
No gully dwarves in your kingdom. Sorry, did I pull a Dragonlance reference for first edition?
Yes, you
did. Everyone here
did.
who hates second edition, I just did a first edition reference for you guys. So keep listening. There'll be more.
Yeah. Every now and then we'll pull one out just to keep you guys happy. Right. But I use hill dwarves, mountain dwarves. As we're going to get into with the complete dwarves handbook, or complete book of dwarves, I should say, is the Sunder dwarves, which actually is a very interesting take. But I usually only use those.
Yeah,
two.
To me it sounds the way that DM Mike was discussing about his world. His adventuring dwarves almost sound like they're gully Sunder dwarves. They almost sound like they're Sunder dwarves. They decided to forego being a dwarf and decided to be, I'll deal with the other races. Sure, I'll be an adventurer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's about what it sounds like to me too.
Actually,
I agree.
I take back. There is this other sub race because in my world I say Darrow or an offshoot of dwarves. They're actually dwarves that have used magic and have become corrupted, which is why dwarves in my world don't like magic, because that means you're basically a Darrow.
Oh, okay.
Yep. That's true too. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the Sunder, the Hill, the Mountain. I actually have Wild Dwarves because the way my world is set up and the way that it's been destroyed and rebuilt, and civilization has to crawl back out of the ashes and rebuild itself. They're a dwarven community that have just been cut off and have gone feral, and they're Wild Dwarves. As far as magic with my dwarves, I would say it's not unheard of, but it's not available to them to say, hey, you want to be a magic user? Sure, I want to be a dwarven magic user. Okay, sounds great. I don't have hundreds of dwarven mages running around. But
now, I would say that's a good point, because I would say if somebody wanted to play a dwarven mage, I'd probably let them. But I'd also let them know right off the bat, any dwarf that sees you casting magic is going to think you're a Darrow and it's going to try to kill you. But if I would let a player try that. I don't. That's one of the great things about second edition, I think, is you don't have the very cut and dried. You can be this, you can't be this, no matter what. I think
Glenn and I have always said since the first episode, second edition is nothing but options. Everything is
absolutely.
The campaign your own, Jeff.
And as far as mages, dwarf mages, what I usually do is, because my world is set up and revolves around gods and their not intervention, but I would say their interaction with the world in general. If you had a dwarven cleric who prayed to the god of magic, I would allow him to dual class cleric mage. But just to have a dwarf go, I'm going to use magic, I'm going to study magic, it would have to be a rarity, and you'd have to come up with a really good, I wouldn't just be like, okay, this is your 7th dwarven mage now in my campaign. I think it's time to look at something else.
Yeah, I think it's starting to become a fetish now.
Yeah. But, speaking of dwarves and what you guys use, let us know what's going on. Give us a call or give us an email. Well, we're talking about dwarves today, so let's move over to the dwarven mines in the cities. We'll go into Rule 0.
One would think you've been doing this all your life.
We'll remember you said that.
I know. I'm sure you hate me just enough.
Rule 0.
All right, Rule 0. These are for the DM techniques and letting us know what the DMs do with what they need in the campaigns that they're running. Today we're talking about dwarven mines in cities. Brian, what do you do with your dwarven mines in cities? Anything special, or do you just copy paste from any module or supplement, or do you do something different with them, or?
Usually when the creative wild hair, strikes, I'll, come up with something interesting. But usually, I usually run, my campaign pretty much out of the book, and I modify as I see fit. one of the best things I've seen about running my particular campaign world of Mastar is that not only do you have a nation of dwarves, but also in the one area where a lot of people suggest to start first level adventures, there's an actual city with dwarves. It's basically like, I'd say probably about 80% dwarves and like 15% gnomes and stuff like that. So you actually get to deal with dwarves on a normal basis. Cities, I usually run it straight out of the Dwarves of Rockholm. I mean, that's about the most complete dwarven nation area that I've ever seen since say probably Dragonlance. And mines mines only usually come into play when they're abandoned and PCs have to go down in them and find stuff. But dwarven mines, I kind of keep that stuff in the background unless, of course, I have somebody playing a dwarf character who wants to start mining, and if he has the right proficiencies for it, of course he can start. And then from there, I'll probably come up with a chart or something like that, and as he's doing his mining and seeing what he might find.
For me, the dwarven mines and cities are important because I it's one of my favorite races, dwarves, just because of the history and the versatility of the race. I go nuts when I get the chance to create a dwarf city or a dwarven mine, because even if it's ruins and the players are going through an old dwarven city, dwarves make traps because they're ready for war at any time. And, this might be their living room, but guess what? Those stairs are trapped because if they got attacked in their city, they'd want to be able to defend themselves at all costs.
Absolutely.
And I get a chance to pull out traps that may not quite, be set out to kill, like pits of acid, but I get to pull out traps that would injure and prevent you access to another area, falling rocks, deadfalls, bars that come out of the wall and bar your path. To create a mine, a city with the defenses that the dwarves would use. Just reading novels and reading some of the books that have dwarven cities in them, in my opinion, it gives you a really great opportunity to go nuts as a DM with defense, because not only now are the players worried about, okay, is there a monster in the next room? It's, can we get to the next room without losing a limb?
Well, that's the thing about dwarven, when you are going into dwarven mines and abandoned dwarven dwellings, is that you have to remember that the dwarves are extremely protective of what is theirs. So anytime as a player, anytime we went into something like that, and if I was running a thief character, I would, let's just put it this way, I was checking for traps every chance I got, and sometimes twice or three times on the same area or item, because that's how they were. They were almost, in a way, almost paranoid about, protecting what is theirs.
It all goes back, even though I'm kind of an anti-Tolkien, it all goes back to Moria. And Moria is probably the coolest. I mean, as much as I'm not a super Tolkien fan, Moria is cool. And that's one great thing about Dwarven Cities. It gives you an excuse to put this gigantic freaking abandoned city underground, inhabited by all kinds of traps and monsters and lost treasures. And that's probably one of the coolest things about Dwarven Cities, is that the fact that if they're gone, there's this giant city there, and you can put all kinds of fun, exciting critters.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, just reading, when I read Tolkien, it opens the juices start flowing about the dwarven cities and how vast and huge they could be. And then I know the movies do not rate to the books, but when you watch the movies and they're actually down in Moria, you're just like, oh my god, I can exactly envision,
just flowing everywhere. You're thinking, oh, this is just way too cool.
Agreed.
Absolutely. That when I saw that, now, okay, I have a confession to make, and this is probably going to lose me points with, with the D&D crowd and whoever's listening, but I can't get through the Tolkien books. I've tried repeatedly. I can't do it. It's just one of those things that, it's just the way my brain is wired. As much as I love fantasy, it's like Tolkien.
Podcast, dude. What's up with you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, say goodbye to DM. No, I'm just kidding.
Hey,
exactly. Hired and fired in the space of 3 days. Yeah, but
that's great.
But when I saw the movie and I actually saw the scope of what Moria was, I sat there in the theater and my jaw was on the ground. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah.
It was, and they only did only sections of it, but there's that one scene where it's just basically a far away wide angle shot and you see the whole party running across the screen. And you could see, even though of course it's CGI, but you can see the depth of it. And I'm like, oh my god, this city is like the size of
city.
Oh my god. Yeah.
When they
like the size of New Haven, Connecticut. It's huge.
Look up and there's this. They look up and you realize this place is way underground and it's really big because when they have to crawl all the way up to the top. You're thinking that's awesome because it makes you immediately just want to get out a big piece of graph paper and start throwing a big.
It did. Yeah, it certainly got my creative juices flowing after I left the theater that night.
I'd have to say, that portion of the movie or that portion of the books actually just it defined dwarves for a lot of D&D players, especially in the nascent years, of them learning, what is a dwarf, what is an elf, and I'll admit I'm one of them. That the books and the movie just it set the dwarves in my mind for me.
I agree.
All right. Well, speaking of dwarves, as we're doing all day here on THACO's Hammer, let's
all dwarves all
that's
the time.
right. Let's move over to option package.
My personality undergoes a startling change.
You should meet me because I'm a great guy.
I like big fat men like you. When they fall, they make more noise. And sometimes they never get up.
Option package.
All right, option package. We're looking today at the complete Book of Dwarves. That would be TSR 2124. Those of you uber nerds who need the DM or the Dungeons and Dragons numbers. I'm gonna go ahead and let DM Bad Mike open up and tell us about the book.
Well, I like this book. First of all, one of the things I noticed when reading it, it's written by Jim Bombra, and is DM Brian probably well knows doing the star. He did some of the best of the UK supplements, including the classic B10, which I think we all enjoy. And it really shows in this book. It's really a good book, and it follows the format of a lot of the other complete books. They give you the different types of dwarven subraces, and they have hill dwarves, mountain dwarves, deep dwarves. So they have the Sunder, Durgar, and the Gully dwarfs, unfortunately. They also give you a little bit of the life of the dwarf, different things you can use to play, role play your character if you want to role play a very traditional. I notice it's a very traditional look at the dwarf. There's a section on character creation, how to create dwarven characters. They have their own proficiency chapter list. The thing I liked most about the book was I liked the dwarf kits. That they have a lot. Now there's a lot of dwarf kits here. I'm going to see 4, 8, 12, 4. I mean, there's about 20 kits, and I didn't think any of these were really awful. Now we did the response writer last week, which actually I thought was a good kit, just not for necessarily a player character. There's some really good ones in here, and I really enjoyed the different kinds of character kits they had here.
Yeah.
There's also it follows up. There's a section on mining equipment. The other section I liked the best was the dwarven strongholds. If we were just talking about the dwarven cities, it gives you some pointers about how to create your own dwarven stronghold. But overall, I thought this is a pretty strong, complete book.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree. This is one of the better complete books in my opinion. It's not over the top. It's not a quote-unquote splat book, as everyone labels the Brown books. Full of information, full of, better ways to role-play your dwarf. The kits, you are absolutely correct. Some of these in here are phenomenal. The Battle Rager, I think I'll leave alone, simply because I think that we, as second edition players and DMs, could probably fill an entire show of just bad experiences, good experiences, weird experiences with interacting with a Battle Rager at your table.
Because everybody wanted to play a Battle Rager
Absolutely.
at one time.
Oh, yeah.
We'll go ahead and give a nod to R.A. Salvatore, Rob, and his creation of Thibbledorf Point. I think set in the minds of everybody, oh my god, that's the kind of dwarf I want to play.
Exactly.
But just taking the Battle Rager out, there's a lot of different kits in here that could fit in any campaign at all, with minimal changing, even under the strictest DM. A lot of them aren't overpowered. They're good roles for a dwarf to fill in a party, from priests to warrior priests to thief kits to just straight.
Really good. They're not overpowered, but they're interesting.
Absolutely.
Even though they're not overpowered at all. Sometimes I think the writers of the complete series feel like they have to make their kit way over the top to make it interesting to players, and that's not the case here at all. I think some of their best kits here are ones that aren't necessarily overpowered, but they have a really great backstory behind them and a really great little purpose. Specifically stuff like I like the Vermin Slayer and
Pest Controller.
The Pest Controller I liked. I thought that was kind of a cool little. I mean, you can think of 10 adventures right there. Just if you have a character that's a Pest Controller, I mean, boom, right off the bat, you've got all kinds of adventures.
They even,
absolutely.
Brian, what do you think of the book?
Oh, when I first got it, I absolutely loved it. As a matter of fact, I still have the original one I bought. But yeah, I mean, the kits are just great. I mean, I've actually run a warrior priest with the champion kit, and I mean, aside from the advantages, it was also good just in the role playing aspect. I mean, the way I played him, he was just a tiny bit snooty, but he knew right from wrong, and he most of the time he didn't let his ego override his common sense. One thing that I particularly liked about this is the fact that when you actually look at the proficiencies, now of course they go through almost the entire list, but you'll notice that dwarves, when it comes to like the craft proficiencies, that they're a lot better at it than humans and elves, and almost everybody is. I mean, armorers are much better, weaponsmiths, blacksmiths. They took that actually into account, that dwarves were that good at these things that that's why people would seek out a dwarf to make a suit of armor, to cut a rough diamond found in a dungeon somewhere.
Far superior to the humans and the elves.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that, that was played up. But yeah, the races, they describe the differences between them, and yeah, when I read this, I was just like, wow, this like puts almost everything I've ever wondered about dwarves into the right perspective.
Right. Sure. Yeah. Two things that I like to point out. Chapter 7 in the book on page 74 is actually about the role-playing and personalities. And a lot of people, like we were talking before, the stereotypical Gimli, everyone knows, that type of dwarf. But in here, it gives 5, I think, or 7 different role-playing personalities for your dwarf. The phobic, the paragon, the hoarder, the decadent, and it adds
the grumbler.
Yes, the grumbler. It to me, this is one of the more important portions of the book. I could do without the kits. I could do without the equipment, the siege weaponry in the back. This helps me as a DM or as a player, form the dwarf in my mind that I want to play. And
anything ideas is great, and then this is chock full of ideas.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The second thing that I'd have to say that I wanted to point out is the art in here. The the
yes.
full color picture, especially on page 77, it's one of my favorite pictures done. It's
Yeah, that's Keith
absolutely,
Parkinson, if I'm
it
not
is
mistaken.
Mr. Parkinson, and there's the three dwarves burying or unburying the chest, and their glee and joy on their face while their leader looks on, menacingly guarding them. Just some of the pictures in here just add personality to a dwarf rather than "Hrumph, get lost," as the dwarf adage is in the book, the dwarf maxim. But I like this book. I definitely, I would give this option package probably 4 out of 5 dragons.
I think one of the we were talking about this earlier amongst ourselves is that I think this definitely blows the complete Book of Elves away, and I think that may have been one of the problem with the complete series. If they'd all been done by Jim Bomber, they'd have been great. Because he did
I agree.
A incredible job. And if they'd all followed this same format, I think it would have been great. The problem is a lot of the books are definitely better than the others in the complete series, but this is definitely one of the better ones. And if you are interested in using dwarves in your campaign as a DM, or you want to play one as a player, I think this is the first place I'd go just to get some great role playing ideas and be able to kind of get into the mindset of a dwarf. I think it does a great job.
I agree completely.
I agree totally. I give it 4.5 out of 5. This is like to me this is the standard out of all of the out of all of the racial books. This has pretty much everything you need, to, if you've got a concept of a dwarf in your head, if it doesn't, give you direct suggestions as to how to flesh out that concept, at least it lays the seeds and puts you on the right path to realize what the concept of the character you have.
Absolutely, I agree.
And there's lots of fun tables to roll on too. So if you don't want to, there's lots of really fun little tables, types of strongholds, types of. Heck, if you just want to totally not think at all, there's a table you can roll on. You can find out what enemies your dwarves are fighting against this week, and it just got really good stuff.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I'd say this one gets a thumbs up from the THACO's Hammer crew here. It is one of the better ones, and I don't see anything bad with the book, other than there needs to be more written.
No, all the other ones need to be rewritten to bring it up to this standard.
I'll agree with that. All right, well, looks like we're done with the complete Book of Dwarves, and we'll move on to Magic Fingers.
Eeny, meeny, chili beanie, the spirits are about to speak.
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead.
Sounds like a lot of supernatural baloney to me.
Supernatural, perhaps. Baloney, perhaps not.
Magic Fingers.
Okay, Magic Fingers. What we usually use for Magic Fingers on the show here is we talk about spells, both magic user and priest, wizard and priest, or we talk about the magic items. What we wanted to do this week was talk about the spells used in something we found in a Forgotten Realms supplement, FR11, called Dwarves Deep by Ed Greenwood. There's a very large section in the back. It's essentially, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong here, Bad Mike, it is essentially a miniature Forgotten Realms filtered version of the Complete Dwarf.
Pretty much, it's Forgotten Realms specific, but there's a lot in this supplement. We won't cover the whole supplement today, but there's a lot in here you can use for any dwarves. But the spell part's very interesting because it basically personalizes the dwarven priest, so they don't have the same kind of spells as every other race. And so there's a really good section that Ed Greenwood has in here, specifically dwarven spells.
Yeah, it's on page 41. It's under the spells usable by most dwarven faiths is the chapter or section. We were looking over this and we thought it would be a good discussion for DMs out there who are playing second edition, or players who might want to bring this to their DM. There's a spell here under the 5th level spells called Rune of Power. Do you want to discuss it there, Bad Boy?
Rune of Power It's pretty cool. It's something you want to throw a little something different in your game. Basically, the spell you create it's more powerful than a glyph of warding. It's kind of similar to a symbol, but it's a rune that does a specific spell action. And we were talking about this, and I think this would be a great thing to throw in your game. That's something that dwarven priests can do that nobody else can do. What they do is they draw these runes of power, and it gives you a list of half a dozen runes of power and what their kind of effects may have. For instance, one of them is a Alhalbrin. It melts metal on all metal items that contact or pass it within 3 rounds of activation. The metal gets a saving throw. So it's just kind of a neat little effect there. The main thing I thought when I looked at this would be something really great to have in your abandoned dwarven city. Have these runes of power sitting here and there, and the players don't know really what they are, and so they're just tootling along, and all of a sudden all their armor starts melting. And what the hell just happened? Well, turns out there's these runes of power all of a sudden.
Right.
And I think they're really good for making I think it's just a good kind of magic that you could really individualize your dwarven priests by give them access to these runes of power.
Yeah, I agree. I really saw this, and this actually helped me build something in my world. The dwarves have the ability in my world for a lost art from the previous ages before the cataclysm happened, the different cataclysms to create the different ages. It's called runic magic. And this helped me build it. Essentially, with their artisan skill and their divine powers, they could transfer those powers to dwarven runes that would actually be portable. Small pieces of steel, small pieces of stone, tablets that they could carry around, no bigger than a CD or something small, and imbue magical properties to those, or a stored spell, if you would. It's a different way for them to use magic that, they get to pull from the priest spell list, but you know what? They can use them differently. Some of the abilities from this Rune of Power spell, and in particular, the Velerdin rune is the Rune of Power that acts as a reverse gravity spell, flinging all beings within 20 feet of it upward 30 feet and then immediately back downward. Now, and creatures unable to fly suffer 3d6 damage, plus 3d6 or less if the ceiling is lower. Impact damage for striking the ceiling. So you're looking at 3d6 damage going up and 3d6 damage going down. In a dwarven mine or a dwarven city, this could be deadly. And that's the kind of idea that I had when I started formulating the runic magic myself for the dwarves in my world. This book alone has a lot of additional dwarven goodies that I don't think would break any world, and I think it would be a good flavor addition to any dwarf that was just ho humdrum. I'm going to do another dwarf in chainmail with a battle axe and a shield. Okay, let's move on.
It has great. He ends it up with a really great paragraph here. He describes quite a few different runes and their different powers, and he says that don't forget lost runes of power. Legends persist of runes once known to the dwarves. They were far more powerful than the existing ones. A single rune of power was used to level the ancient city of blah blah. If you can't find an adventure hook in there, you're not a DM. I mean, that's especially if you have a dwarven centric party.
Right.
Great quest. Go find these ancient runes of power. We have to battle these mind flayers that are taking over our city, and we can't fight them. You have to go out and find these runes of power that can battle psionics. I mean, there's just tons of great adventure hooks out of that.
What do you think, Brian?
Oh, I've been looking this over while the two of you have been talking, and I'm just like, wow. And I like the fact that it makes it gives the dwarf a little bit, or the dwarven priest a little bit better ability beyond just the normal range of spells that he might have. I mean, when it comes down to it, I use I use Fays and Avatars and Powers and Pantheons and Demi-Human deities, and they have good, varying spell abilities.
Oh, the specialty priest spells for each of the gods.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, but this actually just could take just a normal dwarven cleric or fighter cleric who's high enough in level to cast it, and this gives this just almost gives him an exponential, boost in ability and power. And while some might go running away screaming at that, this actually would work well, even for an adventuring dwarf. And like you said, with the Lost Rooms of Power, there's a huge, there's an adventure hook you can hang a side of beef on.
Yeah,
right there.
exactly.
But yeah, this is a wonderful little spell. I wish I'd known about it sooner.
You always want to throw stuff at your players that they're not expecting, at least if you're a mean, cruel DM like me. And so, you have a party run into a bunch of dwarves. Okay, well, dwarves don't cast magic. Let's just go in there and start, we don't have to worry about magic. Oh, well, this dwarf pulled out a stone that's got something on it. He just threw it at us. Oh, my, it was a dwarf power that polymorphs other. Fred over here just turned into a dog. We're screwed. Yeah. And so how these dwarves get, what is this stuff? Another one causes blade barrier. Oh, these guys are kicking our butt now. We thought they couldn't cast spells. They're dwarves. This isn't fair. You're a horrible so that I love.
Yes. Always do things that the players don't expect. Sure. Especially if you've got people who've played the game for at least 10 years and pretty much know everything backwards and forwards. It's always good to, throw them a curveball right at the knees for strike 3. You're out.
Yeah. I love this spell. I love this book. There's not much else to say. My copy that I have is probably one of the more worn supplements on my shelf, just because you can pull so much out of this.
Really good.
One of the other spells I wanted to point out to the players out there who might be interested in, hey, maybe I want to see the other spells in that book, see what's good. I want to point out one of the 4th level spells, Guardian Hammer. It's an invocation clerical spell. It's the Guardian Sphere. What it does is it creates a Guardian Hammer, an invisible hammer-shaped field of force activated when a guard door or other area is disturbed, even years after the spell was cast. When it's activated, it charges through the air to strike the living thing nearest to the disturbed guardian area or any being in the area. If there's more than one, determined randomly. The hammer only strikes once, but it does not miss. So to me, that is an area effect, single target magic missile for a cleric.
It does 4 die.
Yeah, I was going to save that. Yeah, but
that's crazy.
It does 4d6 or 4d12 damage and stuns for 1d4 plus 1 round. So not only are you taking a chunk of their life, and a big chunk at that, you're also stunning them. So, hey, look, somebody just tried to steal my stuff. And now he's on the floor wondering who hit him or what truck ran him over. Now he doesn't get a surprise. So this spell is pretty nice. Once activated, the Guardian Hammer can dodge all magical and physical barriers by way of the ethereal plane, phasing in and out if necessary.
Getting hit, sorry.
And
the only thing better than that is they actually have a spell called Lesser Guardian Hammer at 3rd level. So, if that one's too tough, you can throw that. You can also have a Lesser Guardian Hammer. So I agree that is a really good spell. I like that spell quite a bit.
Yeah,
it's good guarding if you're doing your own Moria, guarding the ancient treasure room or whatever. The guy wanders in. I don't see any traps in here, and whammo, he's staying on the wall.
Yep.
Whoa, which is
yeah, exactly. Because the first paragraph says it stays active even years after. So we were talking about the dwarven cities and the dwarven mines and the abandoned cities. Can you imagine, a military complex portion of the city just loaded with these things, or the treasure room?
Oh yeah, as a matter of fact, I just had this thought while we were talking about this spell. I play a game on my PS2 called Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, and there is a section in the game where you basically have to go to a dwarven city and basically, just to fulfill the mission you're on, you basically have to go in there and go into this one dwarven city. It's basically been taken over by orcs, and if you run into an NPC early in the game and you pay him enough money, he'll give you a key to the treasure room. And if you win your way through to the treasure room, it has a Guardian Hammer in it.
Nice.
Yeah, and basically that thing is basically just about 10 feet above your character, and it comes down and it hits you, or it tries to hit you, and basically, but I think it's more of an animated hammer, but that's the immediate image that brought to me, because you're in that treasure room. It's got at least like 12, 13 chests in it, and this is the one guardian in the room. And and if you're not careful, you can get killed really easily. But yeah, that's what immediately came to mind when we start talking about this.
Yeah, the more I thought about it, that image that I liked from Parkinson in the Complete Book of Dwarves, of the dwarves burying their treasure chest in the middle of the woods. I'm just imagining two of them being high enough level clerics, both of them casting this spell. And then about 4 years later, after the leaves have grown over and the grass has grown over, a small troops of elven adventurers come wandering through the woods, not knowing what's going on, out on their first adventure, and two massive guardian hammers just hammering down these unsuspecting elves.
Turning elves into dwarves.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. Elf pudding, anyone?
And then we didn't even go over. There's but they're all pretty much stone related or fire elemental related spells. But there's some really good spells in there. We don't even have enough time to spend on all the great spells in the
Dwarves Deep.
The Dwarves Deep. But yeah, there's some good stuff. If you like those spells, you would love the rest of them. And I think it really adds a lot to make the dwarven priesthood kind of stand out on its own, not be like the rest of the priesthood, like the generic, priesthood.
Yeah.
I think they're good.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good book. I do like it, and I like the spells that are in it. Well, guys, why don't you go ahead and email us and tell us what you think. Let us know if you like the spells, you don't like the spells. It's a good book. It's a bad book. Give us an email over at thacoshammer@gmail.com. Or, you can call us on the number, 405-806-0555. And what do we have up next? I believe that's Snipe Hunt.
If you only had a living brain.
What do you think? Escaped gorilla?
Listen, you're making enough noise to wake up the dead.
I don't have to wake him up. He's up.
It's time for a Snipe Hunt.
All right, Snipe Hunt. It's time for the monsters to come out and play. This week we have the Duergar, the evil, angry, degenerate cousins to our favorite race of the week, the dwarves.
Basically, they're the drow of dwarves, because they even refer to them as gray dwarves, and they're quite similar. So they're kind of like the drow equivalent to the elves. They're the dwarves that live underground that aren't, they're not very if you thought dwarves were unfriendly, these guys are really unfriendly.
Yeah, they seem to me like if a normal grumpy dwarf is them in a cheerful mood, they are like the grumpiest dwarves.
grumpy to the point where they'd rather just stick a military pick in you than look at you.
I agree. They're
underdogs. They have special powers, which include they can turn invisible and enlarge. They also, which makes them interesting, is they can use wizard spells at a level equal to their hit points. So that's something else. If you have your magic-hating dwarves, here's their cousins that are not only can have special powers, they can also throw a spell at you. So that's going to really piss off your dwarf character there.
Yeah. Basically, Duergar and dwarves. Yeah, basically they're eternal enemies. There's no reconciling there at all. One sees the other, there's going to be a fight.
Well,
that's just how it goes.
Yeah, the Duergar are nasty, nasty monsters simply because, well, not only are they evil and clever, they are nothing more than player character dwarves that have been turned to a monster. They're a bipedal intelligent dwarf that's just a little bit angrier. Well, okay, a lot angrier.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
They're
very militaristic. I like the fact that they're not raving mad psychos running around the Underdark, stabbing everything. Well, they do stab everything that they see, but you can put these guys in armor or magic armor or weapons, and it's another offshoot of the dwarf that continues to survive in the Underdark, and if the normal dwarves can survive on the surface or near the surface, these are the dwarves that can survive living next door to drow, living next door to Iliathids, mind flayers, or whatever.
One thing I really liked about them, and one of the things it says there's a 10% chance the Durgar are accompanied by 2-4 giant steeders, which are basically giant spiders. Screw that. In my world, they're always going to be on giant spiders. That's too darn cool.
Absolutely. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Absolutely.
It's
Go ahead. Go ahead, Mike.
It's way too cool to give a 10% chance to. I'm sorry. There's going to be a 99% chance my Durgar are riding in steeders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in the middle of converting an old D&D module to 2nd edition, and basically where the player characters have to retrieve, basically a dwarven artifact to keep two rival clans of dwarves to go to war. But the Durgar basically are the ones who are trying to foment this war, so that the two clans are so weakened that they can actually swoop in and take over. So it's like the predecessor to Prelude to War, basically, and so basically the PCs have to go down into an abandoned mine, of course, and basically they're going to be running into these guys. A lot of Durgar. I mean, we're talking I think I put the number at like 70, 80 of them, and basically they have to run through to find this artifact and without getting killed. And the spell abilities of these guys is it's just enough to make just running into a normal group of Durgar really, really tough.
But by the way, I think I misspoke earlier. The way I said it, I said they can use spells as a wizard of level equal to hit points. I meant they can use these spells, which were enlargement and invisibility. Those are the only two spells they can cast, or enlargement. Right. But even using those, that's some pretty good little abilities to give to a.
I agree. The Durgar, the Durgar are prevalent in my world, especially in the Underdark. In my world, the Durgar used to be just normal dwarves. The Durgar in my world actually prayed to a certain god that was punished by the Overgod. I think I talked about this in the previous episodes. I'm not sure. Essentially, all of the followers followed the Dwarven god, and he began to try to usurp all the other gods in the Dwarven pantheon, and even boasted to take over the Overgod's position. So he was punished, and he was separated in half. All of his good qualities went to one being, and all of his evil qualities went to another being. The good qualities became the gnomes in my world. So gnomes actually are derived from dwarves.
Interesting take.
All of the evil things became the Durgar, and as such with his followers, that's what happened to the god as well. The god split, and that's where the first gnomish god came from, and that's where the Durgar god came from. So I use the Durgar a lot, especially when there's dwarves or they're going underground, simply because you can level these, and what's the word I'm looking for? You can level them with the player characters. If they're level 2 underground, they can find level 2 Durgar. If they're level 15 underground, you can fight level 15. Well, you can't fight level 15, but you know what I'm saying. You can scale them accordingly, and it's one of the better underground races because not everybody wants to go underground and be like, oh gee, another Drow city. It's a good turnover. Plus,
I don't Drow underground in my world. I'm tired of that.
Yeah, but even those who do use Drow underground, Durgar make great cannon fodder. Sure. They enslave them, or any other race, Iliathids, mind flayers, or even aboleths. Controlling Durgar to do whatever they need done. It's a good monster.
We have similar takes, Corey, in that in my world history, the dwarves basically broke off into 3 races. There was a huge battle back in their history where they basically broke off into the Darrow, the Durgar, and the regular dwarves. And much as your take on it, the Durgar were a bunch of dwarves that worshipped a kind of a not so nice deity. And actually, Darrow were aligned with them, but Darrow were way too much into the magical
studies
spell. Yeah, and they kind of broke off that they consider themselves superior to both Durgar and regular dwarves. But so yeah, we have a lot of similar takes, and I think that works good as dwarves. Just they kind of went a little bit wrong. You know,
Right.
they're not worshiping the happy
Dwarven pantheon.
Pantheon that wants to build and create. They're and it's kind of interesting. The description really doesn't give them a lot of. Doesn't say why they're this way or whatever. So you're really free to kind of. It just says they're a malevolent breed that exists at extreme depths. So you can give them any kind of reason why they're pissed off and mean and evil, without having to worry about getting stepping your feet on any kind of existing history. Now, actually, I think that's one of the things that plays against the Drow, is that we're so used to seeing them in the D series when they first came around in D3, and they worship the Spider God and Loth, and they're just way too connected to that stereotype. Whereas Durgar are pretty much a blank slate. You can make them whatever you want. They could be a clan that went bad. They could be dwarves that got too close to underground radiation and they got messed up. I mean, any kind of explanation.
Yeah, a multitude of different origins for the Durgar. They're very versatile. All right, well, I think we've hunted the Durgar enough for today. Let's
watch out for that invisible one behind you.
Yeah, there's always the invisible one. All right, let's move on.
Well, that's quite a story.
I think it would be fun to run a newspaper.
And here it comes, right over the old plate.
The DM's rag.
All right, DM's rag. DM's rag. Or as Glenn would say, DM's rag. Dungeon number 60, Shards of the Day. Brian, why don't you take this one?
Okay, this is written by Randy Maxwell. And this one is for, it says 5 to 7 PCs, levels 6 to 9, about 40. They want 46 total levels or so. From what I'm seeing, you probably want, I'd probably say about 6 to 8 characters, maybe even as many as 9, because this is a really, really tough adventure. Basically what happens is, by hook or by crook, the party gets summoned to a dwarven baron's castle or estate, and basically he asks them to go into basically a lost dwarven city to retrieve these magical items called Shards of the Day. And he, as it turns out, he has one of the shards called the Shard of Dawn, which is like this really, really wonderful looking magical longsword. And he gives you a little bit of a description as to why these things have been lost. And you go to this city called Dilwillen, and I know that's kind of hard to pronounce, easy for me to say, but
yes.
And basically he tells you that yes, you have to go there. He gives you a map and he sends you down there, and he promises to pay quite a bit of money to retrieve these shards. And for each one, he'll give you this much, or he'll give you a magic item, whatever you can, bargain with him for. Yeah, bargaining with a dwarf, that's a really good idea. And then you get sent down in there, and once you go, almost the second you get in, you start finding out that maybe, even though your characters are pretty strong, you might be just a little bit in over your head.
Nice.
Going up against Durgar and sword spiders and mind flayers. I mean, it's not all against the PCs. You do run into some Sverfnevlin, some deep gnomes, which actually might give you, a place to rest and a place to, get your spells back and get back on your feet before, going back into the breach. But yeah, it's a pretty tough adventure.
The swords are really kind of what they call the MacGuffin. That's just to get you into this underground dwarven city, and they're pretty cool magic items. I like the fact they're not overpowered. So if your character grabbed one and said, "Screw it, I'm keeping this," it's not going to overpower. They're not going to do. It's not the White Plume Mountain syndrome
Yes.
where
Yes.
you're either going to destroy the game world. No, they have a few powers, but they're not overwhelming. So you could even change up the backstory. Maybe your characters just discover The one time I ran it, that's exactly how I ran it. The characters just came across this underground city. But what's great is that they divide the. It's a big city, but they have like what is it, half a dozen encounter areas. You're free to create more. But I was just telling everybody else before we began today that I looked at the monsters, and the creatures you're going to be up against are Kuatoans, Mind Flayers, Driders, Trolls, Troglodytes, basically classic D&D monsters that that are just the kind that you love to fight, and it's got a very classic vibe to it. They're in terms of the foes you're going up against. It does have, like I said, the Durgar and which of course are mounted on spiders. Yay! It's got some really, really interesting little encounters. And another thing about it is, if the whole idea of an underground city doesn't just get you all excited, there's this giant underground dwarven city that you can populate. However, you can always pull these encounters out. That they're very transferable to your own campaign. For instance, like the Mind Flayer encounter or the encounter, you could just pull that out wholesale and stick that in your campaign as an underground lair, and it could fit in there pretty easily.
That's one of the key things I look for when I look for quality of a module is you may not like the MacGuffin, you may not like the plot, you may think it's a railroad, but you know what? If you can take that module and break it into pieces, hey, I need an Mind Flayer encounter. Great, I know where there is one. It's in Dungeon 60, Shards of the Day. That's, to me, that's a higher quality than going, hey, this is a great module, I've ran it 6 times. But if I can say, hey, this is a great module, I've used it in about 1,700 different, campaigns or scenes or sessions in different aspects of it, that to me makes it worth more. Another thing that I found in this module is a set of the geomorph tiles.
That's kind of the. We didn't even talk about that. That's kind of the interesting thing. It's well, go ahead and describe it, Corey. It's kind of an interesting setup for this.
The Dwarven City comes with a set of map tiles, and obviously in the book, I guess they're meant to be cut out or enlarged or what have you. They're hexagrams, 6-sided, and they fit together, and they give you some design examples on how to set them up and how to set up the walls so that you can path through them. You're essentially building a map. If you don't know what a geomorph is, take a piece of paper and draw a room or, a set of land, put a piece of paper beside it, drawing another land, move them around in different positions, and you can make different pathways. That's essentially how you would use a geomorph tile. And the city, actually, the module itself in Dungeon comes with the geomorph tiles for the city.
Mm-hmm. And it gives you, basically the map is just, it's like alphabet soup of letters, because each geomorph tile is lettered, I think, A through J, and you could fit them all together as it's shown here. Of course, you could use them any way you wanted to, but using it the way it's suggested, it also places the half dozen or so layers. So what I think is great about this is you have all these geomorphs, and they're actually really well done. They look really nice. Back in the day, I photocopied them and then pasted them onto cardboard, and they hold up pretty well. But it's just so much area here because besides the 6 basic layers, there's tons of these little hexes, which each hex is 500 feet. You have lots of room to put your own little ideas and little encounters into this.
Yeah, it's like almost like a mini Underdark.
Yeah.
With these, you can arrange and rearrange these tiles in whatever, fashion you want, fashion you choose. And, if you wanted to, you could actually, kind of, just populate and repopulate these areas as the party moves through them and have all these little tiny random encounters. And those are good, but those will also keep the party on their toes for when the actual set encounters come up. And when I first saw this, I was like blown away because I'm like, wow, this is just crazy. Then I look into it a little bit, and this is genius in a way. This is a way to get such a huge, massive area because we're talking hundreds of thousands of square feet.
Yeah, talk about bang for your buck. That's another thing I think Corey looks at that when he was just talking about. This has a huge bang for your buck ratio because it gives you the giant city, it gives you the geomorphs, gives you the sword, all the powers of the swords. It gives you the half dozen or so encounter areas, which basically really are all well done encounter areas, and they're all very deadly, by the way, too. I think
yes.
3 Driders and another one that's got a whole pack of mind flayers controlling trolls. I mean, this is not a easy adventure, but there's a lot of replay value here. I mean, I could see where you could set almost a whole campaign in this city, having the characters
easily
covering it and just going through it all and finding ancient dwarven libraries and ancient dwarven armories and stuff and heck, I'd probably put a group of sundered dwarves or something in here too. Surviving in the I wouldn't put
no.
Basically kind of living in maybe under the city. I mean, it's just a really really good little adventure here. And one thing I have to mention too is it has some really great Jim Holloway
Absolutely. Jim Holloway is a great artist. Did a lot of great first edition art and even a lot of the second edition art. It added to this as well. That was another big selling point for me for this module, just the illustrations.
It's really open-ended. I mean, even after you find the shards, which are the swords, or if you don't, there's a lot of things you can do here because I don't think we mentioned this, but the city is actually on the shore of a giant underground lake, which they just show part of. So if you get tired of exploring the city, hey, let's get on a boat and see what's on the other side of this giant underground lake, or see what's out in the giant underground lake, and bring under.
And another thing that was suggested in the very beginning is that this could actually be tied into the Night Below campaign.
Oh yes, I did see that. Yep.
Now that's like, you want to know what? That is like one hell of a side trip when you think about it. Considering how big Night Below is.
I'm sorry, Brian, I'm going to interrupt you. I was also thinking when I was reading it is the classic D1 through 3. This would fit in a double hex, or if you're familiar with that module, it's got the little hexes that most of them weren't described. This would fit great in a couple hexes right off of the Southern Sea.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and let's start doing the dragon rating for the DM's rag here for dungeon number 60. I'm going to go ahead and I'll give it a solid 4 dragons out of 5.
I was going to give it a solid 4, but I got so exciting talking about it and hearing you guys talk about it. I think I'm going to go up to 4.5 just because I'm looking at it now. I'm thinking that's pretty cool.
Originally, I was going to give it probably about a 3 because the scope kind of whacked me in the back of the head when I wasn't expecting it. But after looking at it a little bit further and seeing just how deep this adventure actually is, to where aside from the main thrust of the adventure, you can throw whatever you want into this area and it'll work and it'll fit. I'll give it a 4.
Nice. 4 and a 4 and a 4.5.
Average, yeah. And it definitely something you can use in any kind of Underdark.
Yeah, I agree. This is a keeper. This is a good one.
Absolutely.
Well, give us your take on it. Let us know your reviews and get back to us at our email address, thacoshammer@gmail.com, or the voicemail number, Mike?
You got me.
405-806-0555. Didn't mean to put you on the spot there, Mike, but
you caught him out.
I did. I called him out.
And this is the second week in a row we want to give a little love to Purple Worm.
Absolutely.
Purpleworm.org.
Yes. The
forum
message board.
And message board for second edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
It is a great forum, not to be overshadowing any other forums that we all love, Dragon's Foot, but it does specifically and only cater to second edition Dungeons and Dragons, and it actually has sections for all the different worlds that second edition is known for: Mystara, Planescape, Birthright, Forgotten Realms, and it's
a good site. It can use a lot more traffic. It is a very well put together site.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
A little up Lance Halvermail. I noticed he's been posted over there now. He's he did a couple of Dungeon Magazine adventures. I remember correctly, 2 or 3. He's a good guy. He's I've met him at a con before, but yeah, he's posted over there quite a bit. So you actually have creators there too.
Yep, this is true. All right. Well, looks like we're at the end of our show here, folks. Episode 4 is in the can, as they say. We're got 4 taken care of, and I guess we'll say say goodnight. And we'll see you next week.
Great time,
Gracie.
Brian. Hope you can hear you back here again.
I would love to, absolutely.
You will be. Welcome. Well, everybody, good night, and we'll see you next week.
Later. Guys.
Bye.
THACO's Hammer theme is provided by the Diablo Swing Orchestra. You'll find them on Jamendo.com. All other additional music for this episode was provided by Kevin MacLeod. You'll find him on Incompetech.com. Be sure to visit our website at thacoshammer.info. If you have any questions or comments, email us at thacoshammer@gmail.com. Remember, that's an O, not a 0. Also, you'll find us on the 2nd Edition forum at dragonsfoot.org, or you can give us a call and leave a message at 405-806-0555. See you next time when the hammer comes down on THACO's Hammer.